Hello and welcome back to another video. My name is CJ the Populist New Yorker, and today we're going to be doing a different kind of video on this channel. We're going to be taking a look at the Virginia gubernatorial race, but we're going to be breaking down 8 ads, 4 from either candidate in the race, on a variety of issues. These will range from the first 2 ads being just general ads that aren't wholly specific on specific policies, abortion, crime, and vaccines, which seem to be the main issues in the Virginia governor's race. As we look at some polling right now, we can see that Terry McAuliffe has had a steady lead this entire time. This isn't surprising. Virginia is a Democratic state. It is not a swing state anymore. But this race is a bit closer than most in Virginia in recent history. Terry McAuliffe is ahead, but he's not ahead by a resounding amount. 3.5 points, 4 points, 4.4%. Obviously, Terry McAuliffe has an advantage, but it is within the margin of error. At least some of these polls, Terry McAuliffe is in the margin of error. There's only been one poll where Glenn is outright leading, Glenn Youngkin, and that is a WPA intelligence poll. All the other polls have him either tied or very close. So Glenn Youngkin is within striking distance, but he has yet to be in a poll where he's over 50%. So that isn't too great for him, although Terry McAuliffe has only been ahead by 50%, I believe, in 3 polls this entire race. This was an election that was really polled. If we go back to the 2017 election, which I don't have pulled up right now, but we had polls going back to 2015. These polls, the first poll we got out of this entire race was back in June. So polling has really ramped up lately because people are realizing this race is going to be a lot closer than people think. I still categorize this race as lean Democratic. If we take a look, of course, at the 2020 election, Joe Biden won by 10.1%. Virginia did not have as dramatic of a swing to the left as Colorado did, but we saw a lot of flips in previously red counties in Virginia, Stafford County being one, Chesterfield County, James City County, Virginia Beach, and Lynchburg. These were all counties or cities that were reliably Republican up until the 2020 election, in which they flipped. Youngkin is obviously going to need those to win those back and more if he's going to win. Terry McAuliffe has a much easier time to re-election because he was governor from 2014 to 2018. Because again, this is a Democratic state. He just needs his base to turn out and he will win. The energy seems to be more on the Republican side. That's why we're seeing polls this close. I feel like if this was a high turnout race, and again, if we look at polls of registered voters, there aren't a whole lot here, but it tends to be a more skewed result when you have registered voters because these are voters that are registered. There's more Democrats in Virginia than Republicans. So naturally, Terry McAuliffe would have an advantage. In a high turnout situation, I think Terry McAuliffe would easily beat Glenn Youngkin. But since we're not looking at that situation, we don't know what the turnout's going to be. Based on the early voting, it doesn't seem like we're going to have particularly high turnout in this race. Probably similar to 2017 turnout, perhaps in Virginia. Because when I looked at the early voting, there compared to 2020, there was virtually no early in-person voting. So that really goes to tell you that this is not going to be a super duper high turnout election, but probably something we saw like in 2017. If we take a look at the 2017 election results, Ralph Northam won over Ed Gillespie by about 9 points. And Ed Gillespie barely did better than Trump did in a lot of these suburban Nova counties. Glenn Youngkin, as we're going to see in the ads, is a slightly different type of Republican. He's billing himself as a moderate, suburban-friendly Republican, and you have to do that to win in Virginia. Virginia is a very suburban state. Southwestern Virginia is very, very, very conservative, but most of the people live in and around Nova and the Hampton Roads, Richmond area. That's where the bulk of the state's population is, and those are the areas that have been trending very Democratic lately. So I don't want to waste too much time going in on this synopsis. We'll get to talk about this, of course, in other videos on Virginia. We're really in, not the final stretch, but, election day's coming up for Virginia and New Jersey. So things are really starting to heat up, and we're going to see that with these ads. So first, we're going to take a look at a general ad from Glenn Youngkin, and then we're going to talk about that ad real quick and see how effective it might be. So here's the first Glenn Youngkin ad. This isn't on a particular topic. It's just a general ad that he's putting out there.
It's not your imagination. Consumer prices are going up. And to make matters worse, Virginia is only one of 13 states to tax groceries. As governor, I will eliminate Virginia's grocery tax. Career politicians will call it radical, but to me, it's just common sense. Because saving a little extra on milk and bread and all of this, it adds up. It's time to make it a little easier to live, work, and raise a family here in Virginia.
So that's an ad called Common Sense, I believe. It's very economically focused. It focuses on the grocery tax in particular, but mostly on taxes and the economy. And those are like the issues where I think Republicans can certainly win in a place like Virginia. Virginia's not an overly progressive state. It's a left-leaning centrist state. Really is a centrist state, honestly. And with the Trump era, the Republican Party, Republicans have really been losing it with moderate voters, not only in Virginia, but all across the country. I certainly think Glenn Youngkin can and will do better with those moderates, but will it be enough to win? That's really the ultimate question. Overall, the ad was very non-threatening. You know, it's the kind of campaign he's trying not to scare the suburbs, which, you know, are increasingly more Democrat, not just in Virginia, but around the country. So now we're going to look at a generic Terry McAuliffe ad. This, again, doesn't really have a particular theme, although there is a jab at the end against Glenn Youngkin. I will say that going through the candidates' various ads, there's more negative ads probably on the Terry McAuliffe side, mostly tying Glenn Youngkin to Trump. And I think he's really doing that because this is a race that should not be as close as it is in Virginia. You know, Terry McAuliffe was a popular Democratic governor. He had very decent approval ratings, very good approval ratings. So the fact that this race is close now is not good news for him. And I think that's mainly because you're going to have the turnout differential. You know, if this was a typical turnout election, normal presidential election, Terry McAuliffe would do great if the Virginia governor's race was alongside the presidential race. But he doesn't have that luxury. He's going in an off year, not just a midterm, but an off year in 2021. So turnout is not going to be very high. It's probably going to be around 60 to 70% of 2020 turnout. That's what I estimate. So certainly you're going to have more Republicans in that mix. You're going to have a redder electorate. So anyway, here's the first Terry McAuliffe ad, and then we'll talk about it.
When it comes to our future, it all comes down to who our governor is fighting for. For Terry McAuliffe, it's you. It's about jobs, raising wages, and rebuilding from COVID stronger than ever before. But not for Glenn Youngkin.
President Trump represents so much of why I'm running.
Said, you know what, here comes another guy who's like Donald Trump. And I said, thank you very much.
We've come too far to let Glenn Youngkin take us backwards.
I'm Terry McAuliffe, candidate for governor, and I sponsored this ad.
So this ad's a very generic ad from Terry McAuliffe. It's talking about his record as governor and how when he gets back into power, he's going to make a Virginia that works for everyone. Again, he did a jab at the end at Glenn Youngkin, tying him to Donald Trump, which is smart. That's objectively smart to do in the Virginia suburbs. Virginia suburbs do not like Donald Trump. Gillespie, who wasn't even Donald Trump, couldn't even break 40% in any of the Virginia suburban counties. For comparison, Loudoun County was won by Ed Gillespie in 2014. He won Loudoun County, and in 2017, he lost it by 20 points. So this is the kind of ad that certainly is going to work among Terry McAuliffe's base and probably moderates. It sends an overall positive and optimistic message while also attacking Glenn Youngkin, his opponent, which I think overall is a pretty solid ad. So now we're going to get into the abortion ads. And this is an issue that's really been hot button in this race, mostly because of Texas, not because of Virginia, because Texas passed a very restrictive abortion bill that basically prohibits abortions before 6 weeks. And the Supreme Court basically declined to overturn this law. So it's become a very political issue, particularly being weaponized by Terry McAuliffe and the Democrats, trying to paint Glenn Youngkin as an abortion a pro-life extremist, that he wants to ban all abortion, period, supports the Texas law, etc. So we're going to get into that ad first. So here we're going to take a look at Terry McAuliffe's abortion attack on Glenn Youngkin.
A controversial Texas law that would ban most abortions went into effect this morning.
The most restrictive abortion law in the country.
It essentially bans all abortions after 6 weeks. 6 weeks before most women even know they are pregnant.
Did you see the abortionist though?
Yeah, I'm going to be really honest with you. The short answer is, in this campaign, I can't. When I'm governor and I have a majority in the House, we can start going on offense. I will not go squishy, but I got to win.
So I think this ad is going to be really effective in the Virginia suburbs and the blue parts of Virginia. That hot mic moment for Glenn Youngkin, where there was a left-wing activist that secretly recorded him saying that he was gonna, stick it to the abortionists when he got into office. If Glenn Youngkin loses, that's certainly gonna haunt him in his campaign because that was a huge blunder, and I doubt. Obviously, that's gonna energize some people in his base. Always pro-life, etc. in the Southwest, but it's really, I think it's going to hurt him more than it's going to help him. And Terry McAuliffe hitting him on that relentlessly is a good idea in Virginia. If we look at the 2020 Virginia exit polls, 54% of voters based on this exit poll think abortion should be illegal. 42% think it should be illegal. I think give or take a few points. I think 42 is quite high, but Virginia is still a southern state culturally outside of Nova. Abortion, I can't imagine, is very popular. So 42% of the state being pro-life sort of makes sense and sort of adds up. But again, it's not a majority. The popular opinion in Virginia is Roe v. Wade. So the fact that Terry McAuliffe is running that ad in particular is going to be pretty devastating for Glenn Youngkin. But Glenn Youngkin actually has a decent counter ad. I don't think it's going to be as effective, but I think objectively it's a decent counter ad. And it basically attacks Terry McAuliffe's position on abortion, arguing he's too extreme. Let's take a look.
I'm Glenn Youngkin, candidate for governor, and I sponsored this ad.
Where it's obvious that a woman is about to give birth, would that still be a point at which she could request an abortion?
My bill would allow that, yes.
Governor, would you have vetoed the bill?
I would not have vetoed that bill. This was a common sense bill.
The infant would be delivered, the infant would be kept comfortable, and then a discussion would ensue between the physicians and the mother.
Through the third trimester. I don't think we have a limit in the bill.
Terry McAuliffe, too extreme for Virginia.
So like Terry's ad, I think that ad is effective in a number of ways. Now, I don't think, Democratic suburbanites are going to buy that ad of abortion extremism from Glenn Youngkin. I doubt it. Maybe moderates will. But obviously, most people in Virginia have made up their minds. These candidates are really just fighting for those people in the middle, that small percentage of voters in the middle that really swing either election. Because while turnout does matter, those independent voters, those moderate voters are really going to decide who wins this race. Again, that moment from Ralph Northam was pretty bad, objectively, for PR purposes. It really hurt him. That's actually what led, that quote actually is what led to his blackface scandal being released by a classmate of his from his medical school. It was because of that. And the reason that bill didn't go anywhere was because the Virginia legislature was still controlled by Republicans, although it might have died in committee. I haven't followed it too much. But either way, I don't think it would have passed because at that point, you had Virginia's legislature controlled by Republicans. Very narrowly. I think it was 1 seat in each chamber or 2 seats and 1 seat. Something like that. It would not have passed. But Virginia has a Democratic trifecta now. So perhaps the argument can be made. Now, Terry McAuliffe knows that obviously this whole late-term abortion argument, that's not popular either among moderates. So, either ad could be effective in a variety of ways. So I think both of those ads are pretty good ads on the abortion issue. Crime has also become a big issue as it has been around the country. Both candidates are trying to use their endorsements from various sheriffs to try and win the narrative on crime. Glenn Youngkin, I think, has the endorsement of over 50 sheriffs. Terry McAuliffe, as of right now, I think has around 4 or 5. So, and those sheriffs are roughly from blue areas. We're going to take a look at Glenn Youngkin's crime ad first, and then we'll take a look at Terry McAuliffe's, and we'll talk about it.
Homicides in Virginia are at a 20-year high.
And we are stressed to the limit.
Now, extreme Democrats supporting Terry McAuliffe want to defund the police.
Glenn Youngkin, he'll defend us.
Youngkin has a plan to crack down on crime. That's why over 50 sheriffs from Montgomery
to Prince William County,
from Virginia Beach
to Richmond,
are ready to roll with a governor who will keep Virginia safe.
I'm Glenn Youngkin, candidate for governor, and I sponsored this ad.
So this ad has a number of things going for it. One thing I really like about it, and that's smart, is that Glenn Youngkin is using sheriffs from blue counties. Prince William County went heavily Democratic in 2020, and I believe the Prince William County Sheriff might actually be a Democrat. I could be wrong, but I think he is. Loudoun County, Chesterfield County, Virginia Beach, Montgomery County. These are all counties that went for Joe Biden in 2020, and all but probably one, I don't know if Prince William does, but all but one have Republican sheriffs. So these are counties that are able to vote for Republican sheriffs, but still vote for Democrats statewide. And he's trying to use that appeal from these sheriffs to actually win the day on this argument of crime. And it might work. I think it's smart, and I don't think it can hurt him. I don't know how much the crime issue is really going to be is going to be that important once we get the exit polls out of 2021. But overall, I don't think it's a bad ad. I don't think Glenn Youngkin goes too far. The sheriffs are trying to argue that Terry McAuliffe wants to defund the police. That's not necessarily true. Both candidates are trying to run as the other candidate would be bad for law enforcement and would defund their police either via budget cuts or just directly. And that's kind of what Terry McAuliffe's ad gets into as well. We'll take a look at that right now.
Our job is to keep Virginia safe.
And we know the truth about Terry McAuliffe's record.
When Terry McAuliffe was governor, Virginia was the 4th safest state in America.
That's right, the 4th safest.
And Terry increased funding and training for police.
It's Glenn Youngkin who worries us.
Glenn Youngkin wants to roll back gun safety laws, including background checks.
Letting violent criminals have more access to guns.
Putting our lives at risk.
It's Glenn Youngkin who's a real threat to our safety.
I'm Terry McAuliffe, candidate for governor, and I sponsored this ad.
So a very similar style ad to Glenn's ad. He's got a bunch of sheriffs. These sheriffs, of course, are from blue areas. Henrico, Fairfax. These are much bluer areas overall than, Virginia Beach, Montgomery, Loudoun, etc. But it hits the message home, and it actually makes an interesting argument about, the fact that Glenn Youngkin is opposed to gun control and how that will increase crime. Glenn Youngkin is trying to make the argument throughout his campaign that, Terry McAuliffe's parole board has been paroling dangerous felons. And, both candidates are trying to say that they're better on crime, they're tougher on crime. And I think that's interesting because it really goes to show you that both candidates know that Virginia is a very centrist state. In a very left-wing state, Terry McAuliffe's ad I don't really think would be very popular among the Democratic base of being like, I'm pro-law enforcement, etc. And that's not to say Democrats are anti-law enforcement necessarily, but it's to say that they don't really like the idea of, idolizing police. They see police more as servants who need to be held accountable, not just, blind praise, I guess. Next, we're going to look at the final issue, which is vaccines and vaccine mandates. This one got very heated probably within the last month. Glenn Youngkin believes that vaccination should be a choice. No person should be forced to get a vaccine at a place of employment or a business. Terry McAuliffe has stated that he wants school children that are eligible, so as young as 12, or if it gets approved, even younger. He wants COVID-19 to be added to the list of required vaccinations, so people would argue he's very much in favor of forced vaccination in some cases. So we're going to look at both of their ads. First, we're going to look at Terry McAuliffe's ad that basically accuses Glenn Youngkin of being anti-vax.
This is a vaccine that people don't fully understand yet.
If someone doesn't want to get the vaccine for whatever reason, and there are lots of good reasons.
If you want it,
take it. If you don't want it, don't take it.
One of the things I encourage folks is if they do have an exception policy, and I encourage people to fill it out and stand up for your exception.
I would not require a vaccine in order to continue to work for Virginia.
I think that's life-threatening. And I think that's disqualifying as governor. I want everybody to be vaccinated here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. I'm Terry McAuliffe, candidate for governor, and I sponsored this ad.
So that ad off the bat, I think, could probably scare some Democrats. The vaccine issue has really been an issue. I didn't really see that. I didn't think it was going to be that politicized about a year ago, but it's become a heavily politicized and divisive issue. And Terry McAuliffe is very much leaning into the idea that he wants to make sure that every Virginian gets the vaccine. He wants school children to get it. That's something he said during the debate. Highly recommend watching the debate if you're really interested, especially if you live in Virginia. I would definitely recommend watching the debate because Terry McAuliffe is very much in favor of making sure that kids have the vaccine in public school, possibly private school, I'm not sure. But overall, the ad paints Glenn Youngkin as an anti-vaxxer, which, I mean, if I must say, I think it's very disingenuous because Glenn Youngkin has said many times and that he wants people to get the vaccine. If Glenn Youngkin actually was running an anti-vax campaign, and not anti-vax mandate, just straight anti-vax, I don't think he would win in a great many states. But he's running against the mandates, which is the popular opinion among Republicans. I don't really know polling on the vaccine issue in Virginia. I'm guessing Terry McAuliffe probably has a slight edge on that issue, but I imagine it's quite close. So now we're going to put Glenn's counter ad up and see how effective that might be.
I've practiced medicine for over 30 years. I'm disgusted to see Terry McAuliffe's lies about Glenn Youngkin. McAuliffe's smear campaign puts politics over science, and it is dangerous. Here are the facts. Youngkin believes that vaccines save lives and is the only candidate with a TV ad encouraging Virginians to get the COVID vaccine. I trust Glenn Youngkin to keep Virginians healthy.
I'm Glenn Youngkin, candidate for governor, and I sponsored this ad.
So Youngkin's ad kind of goes after Terry McAuliffe for politicizing the issue. You know, he stresses that everybody should get the vaccine, which I guess might land in suburban Virginia, although from what I'm seeing just out in the ether, folks that already lean Democrat aren't going to buy Glenn Youngkin's position anyway. They don't like Glenn Youngkin. They call him Trumpkin or whatever. So they're not buying Glenn Youngkin. This is why this election really comes out to turn out. And, you know, Glenn Youngkin is trying to win over those moderate voters, trying not to scare them, trying to say, which I think is a very rational position, that vaccine should be a choice. And, you know, he's got a doctor up there who's kind of an authority figure telling you the same thing. And, you know, that generally is a pretty reasonable position. So I think Glenn Youngkin's ad, at the end of the day, is pretty smart. But Terry McAuliffe is certainly going to mobilize his base with that ad. I don't think Glenn's ad is going to be very popular among his base, just because his base, aren't really big fans of the vaccine in general. So he's really trying to reach out to suburban swing voters in and around Richmond, Hampton Roads, and the Fairfax area, Washington, D.C. area. He's trying to win them over and say that, you know, I'm not a scary candidate, you can elect me, etc. So overall, I think those particular ads are pretty good ads for a number of reasons. I don't think any of them is a particularly bad ad. I've gone through most of the ads from the candidates for this video, trying to pick out the ones that I think are probably going to be the most effective. A lot of Terry McAuliffe's ads focus on tying Glenn Youngkin rather, to Trump. A lot of Glenn's ads focus on the economy, talking about how, Terry McAuliffe is weak on crime. His record wasn't as good as he claims it is, etc. That's the kind of campaign you'd expect, I suppose, in this race. But again, I don't live in a swing state, so I'm not blessed with all these ads, and I'm sure that blessing becomes a curse. You know, I've traveled to swing states. I've been to Pennsylvania last summer, saw a lot of ads. I was actually in Virginia this summer too, and I saw some Youngkin and Terry ads while I was down in Virginia back in July. So that was pretty interesting, because over here where I live, I only get local races. I get maybe Congress and some town stuff. I don't get any bigger races because we don't have competitive races here in New York. So in some ways, I kind of envy the people that get to see all these ads, really get to be on the ground in these states to kind of gauge which way these races are going. Because me, as somebody who kind of analyzes this stuff, I can only guess based on the numbers and the sentiment that I think is happening in these states, but I don't actually live there, and I wish I kind of had that insight as well. So anyway, guys, I hope you really enjoyed this video. Please leave a like if you did. Please subscribe to the channel. Also, if you did, share these videos with your friends. Get these videos out here. Comment down below your thoughts. And once again, I want to thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.